And welcome back to Right Side Broadcasting Network. Let's go to some news footage from the Trump White House.
A lot of people have been asking to see. We've done a lot of work. We've spent hundreds of millions of dollars already on the ballroom, and it's coming out, I think, incredibly. We have some renderings down of the finished product. It's all knit together. At the top of the ballroom is what they call a drone gallery. We have tremendous amounts of military able to be on the top. It'll be the highest point. It'll be actually higher than this building abroad. And sites over Washington, so that's important. But it will be something very special. So if you look up at the top, you'll see some interesting things, and I'll show that to you in a second. You want to grab that, please? I'll show that to you in a second. The facade of the building. There will never be another building like this built. That I can tell. I built a lot of great things, but there will never be anything like this built. And what we have is the roof is dead flat with absolutely nothing but strength on it. It's very strong steel. It's drone-proof, and it's meant for our military to be able to stay on it. You get a view of Washington. Also, for the drone building capacity, some of that takes place right down here. You can see the very large piping and the other things. It's a very complex building. It's all knit together. The roof goes with the ground floor. The ground floor goes with the roof. The roof also goes down into the basement. Everything is connected, intertwined. Elevators, heating, air conditioning. It's one building. That's why we're trying to explain that. This is one well-knit building. One thing doesn't work without the other. Very importantly, though, in terms of the beauty, probably the closest thing to this would be the U.S. Supreme Court, the facade of the U.S. Supreme Court. So here's a couple of things you can look at. How are you? There will never be another thing like this, I don't believe, built from a court standpoint. This is all my money and donors' money. This is tax-free. So everyone's talking about they're going to give money, they're going to give money. The money they're going to give is really for the security of that and the whole White House premise. And I guess you probably need that nowadays. We've done the fencing on the outside of the White House. It's all titanium. You see the black fencing. That's been just done recently, and it was approved originally by me, and it's been completed, and it's very powerful, very powerful. A tractor, a bulldozer cannot knock it over. It goes down deep, and it's titanium, which is the strongest of all of the metals, much stronger than steel, as an example. The ballroom is all... it's going to be a tremendous thing. As an example, what happened a couple of weeks ago at the White House Correspondents' Center could not happen here. One thing that we have is we don't have people living above it. We don't want that. That's no good. They have 1,000 units above it with the elevator coming right down next to where the convention or whatever it may be is. So this is a room that's been wanted for 150 years by presidents. We have no room to have an event. The only way you can have an event is if you build a tent on the lawn, and the tent would not do the job. And by the way, if it rains here, because this is built on a wetland, the lawn is impossible to deal with. The water goes over everybody's shoes. It literally goes over the shoes. So, and they've had a lot of catastrophes with the tent. So we have this, and if you take a look at this section, this is the different facade. So this is a Greek. More or less, it comes out of Greece. This is the ultimate facade for Greece. This faces the Treasury building. This is a different facade. That's Rome. And that faces the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, etc. So you have two facades. Primarily, you have two entrances. You have here, you have here. But the primary entrance is through the White House, directly through the White House. And it's really something. I think you can see the complexity. All of these columns go directly up to the roof. And the roof is a barrier. It's a shield because it's made out of the sidewalls are steel, impenetrable steel, and also impenetrable glass. The glass is approximately 4 inches thick. and yet it's amazing. You can see through it as though it didn't exist. It's amazing. And it can stop just about anything. Just about anything. On the other side of the glass, we have steel and concrete, so that the glass is very powerful. What's holding the glass is equally as powerful. And that's here. You can see they're just about ready to go up to the top. All of these columns, they go directly right to the roof of the building. And again, we call it a drone port. It's set up for unlimited numbers of drones. Purposely, we don't have any air conditioning equipment up there because we don't want anything coming down through the pipes. If anybody gets, normally you'd have a lot of air conditioning equipment on the roof. We built it all inside the building, inside the case of the building, because we don't want to have anything having to do with air or air quality or any problems playing with the air. So you'll notice it's a dead flat roof with no equipment on it. All of the equipment is inside of the building, and that's for safety reasons. Normally you'd do it a lot less expensive. You'd do it a different way. So all of this was paid for by myself, and because I keep hearing like, we are making a gift of this board. This is a gift. This is not going to be paid for by the taxpayer. We have a judge that thinks it's a terrible thing that we're making a gift. He said it's terrible that we're making a gift. It should be paid for by the taxpayer. That's one I've never heard before. I'm sure maybe, I don't know, maybe he doesn't understand. This is a gift to the United States of America. And more than a gift, it's going to be one of the most beautiful buildings that's ever been built in the country or in Washington, D.C. So here's the other facade you see over here. And again, this is taken, these great classical buildings get taken out of different parts of the world from very glamorous times. This is Rome. They like the flat roof. Greece likes they call it the triangles, and you see that. This is a porch that looks out over the city. Also, it's developed in such a way that we can have military there, but the entire roof is developed for military. It's very high. They're higher than just about anything else. They have a 360-degree vision of Washington, D.C. They have a massive drone capacity. Not only is it drone-proof, if a drone hits it, it bounces off. It won't have any impact. But it's also meant as a drone port, so it protects all of Washington, the roof of the building. Okay? Now, does anybody have any questions? If you want, you can take, I think you can bring your camera down. You might want to take a look at the complexity. These are all different rooms down here. They're building a hospital. They're building, it's a military hospital. They're building all sorts of research facilities, also meeting rooms and rooms that go hand in hand for the military, using the ballroom. And the ballroom is really a shield and protecting all of the things that are built here. This goes, as you see, it's already up to the ground. This goes down very deep. You get a better view right over here. This is down because we've already done these floors. But these are already down 2 floors. It's down about 6 stories deep. That's big stuff. You build a ballroom, you build it flat. You just build a ballroom. It would have been built. It's all knit together between the drone proofing, the missile proofing we have, and the drone capacity upstairs. We can have all sorts of military up with it. I hate to use the word snipers, but we have great sniper capacity. It's built for our snipers, not the enemy snipers, our snipers. And because of the height, we get a very clear view of everything all over Washington. Yeah.
So President, you mentioned that this is being paid for out of pocket, but why is Congress in pocket? Explain sort of the difference.
Well, they're not. Congress is approving. Yeah, Congress is approving money for security. It may go. Some of it may go here for additional security. I don't know. But Congress is approving money. But this building, I mean, I put up the money to build this building, along with a lot of great patriots. Have put up a lot of money to build the building, and we have a building that is going to be, I think it's going to be potentially the most beautiful building in all of Washington, and with that is great military capacity. We're building it in conjunction with the United States military and the Secret Service.
approve that money, can this project still be completed?
Well, they have a budget in Secret Service and the military to do some of the work that you see right here. So the answer is, I think they want to enhance what you see. It's very powerful. You see what's happening. It's very powerful concrete. It's 9,000-pound concrete. That, if you know anything about contract. But they probably want to enhance the area. They're going to spend money. This is a very sacred piece of land. This is the White House, and they want to do things. But everything that you see and the money that's being put up to build the ballroom, and again, the ballroom, it's necessary for the ballroom to be built with what you see over here. It's all knit in. The air conditioning, the heating, the drone capacity, the shield. You know, the ballroom becomes a shield for everything that you see right here. Without that, they couldn't have this. They couldn't build the lower floors. Without that shield over the top of it, it's a shield that will totally protect what's downstairs. They have a lot of things going on downstairs, and some of it you see. This goes down 6 stories because it's already been built. This will be very shortly. This will be in the form of the roof goes along this lines. Basically, it goes outside. You see where the wood is. You're going outside of that line, and then it goes straight up. And it's all protection, and everything's together. You can't build one without the other. And what we have is we have the safest building ever built, in my opinion. You can have, and you know, the other thing is, when we're right on budget, we're right on plan. The only budget change would be that we doubled the size at the request of the military. We doubled the size, but we're right on budget, right on plan, and originally we were going to build a much smaller room, and it wouldn't have done the job. It just wouldn't have done the job. You have too many events. Like if we have President Xi coming here, we have no place to put him. We had the King and the Queen the other day, and we had 1,000 people wanted, and we ended up having 100 people sitting in a very small room. We've been after this for a long time, but maybe more important is the safety element. This is a shield. It protects everything that's inside, everything that's on top. And, you know, obviously the White House was built in 1792. You know, it's awfully hard to do that kind of a capacity that we did here. So this will give future presidents, but you have to understand, when this is finished, my term ends shortly after that. This is really for other presidents. This is not for me. This is my gift to the United States of America. I'm going to be able to use it very little, because when it's finished, we're talking about 6 or 7 months. But it will be used for hopefully hundreds of years for other presidents. And there will never be anything like this built again. There'll never be a room built like with the safety. As an example, if we had the White House correspondents in here, it would have been no problem.
Media at RSB Network. And for me personally, if you want to follow along with me on Truth Social, you could follow me at Matt Kane, that's Kane, or on X or Twitter, whatever you refer to it as now, at Matt Kane USA. President Trump was back in action on American soil yesterday, partaking in a healthcare affordability meeting just days after returning from the historic state visit in China. It was met by an unexpected supporter, at least in this regard, Mark Cuban. We'll get more into that later. U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., Jeanine Pirro, sounded off on a troubling instance of youth crime over the weekend in a Washington, D.C. Navy Yard Chipotle, while Secretary of War Pete Hegseth honored 9 service members with Purple Hearts. We'll get to all that, but first, to begin today's broadcast, we turn your attention to the highly anticipated Kentucky primary election, which commenced today. Now, firstly, if any of our viewers tuning in are Kentucky residents, we highly encourage you to go out and participate in your civic duty and vote. I say highly anticipated because unlike normal deep red state primaries that are mostly a formality, at the center of this one is the long feud between President Trump and Congressman Thomas Massie, which finally comes to a head tonight. Before getting into the details, the president sent out multiple truth videos and tweets, I should say truths and truth videos on the subject throughout this past week, including 2 videos that just last night weighed in on the state of the race, and we want to show you those. So please roll elements 1 and 2.
I'll be doing hopefully a very powerful tele-rally tonight for a friend of mine, Ed Galrain, who is a fantastic man, a fantastic hero, war hero, farmer from Kentucky's running against the worst congressman, in my opinion, worst Republican congressman in the history of our country. The guy's a total disaster, and you know who it is? Thomas Massie. He's the worst. So we have to get out and vote. We have to make sure that Ed gets there. I mean, Ed left the Republican Party because he couldn't stand Massie, couldn't stand watching him, couldn't stand how disloyal he was to your president. He left the Republican Party, but he came back, and he came back strong. He couldn't stand Massie, and neither can I. A bad guy. So get out and vote. Thanks a lot. Bye. I hope you're going to put him out of business tomorrow. I'm in the Oval Office, and we're in a fight against the worst congressman in the history of our country. His name is Thomas Massie. He's from Kentucky. I hope you're going to put him out of business tomorrow. He is so bad. Got an election coming up. He's running against a great guy, a great patriot, Ed Gilrain. He's fantastic. But forget that. Massie's the worst congressman in the history of our country, always voting against Republicans and good values. So get rid of Thomas Massie.
Now, we all know the power of the Trump endorsement, especially so in primaries where it's Republicans taking on other Republicans. There is a unique faction of Massie supporters that circulate videos on social media to make him look more favorable and relatable to the American people, to try to generate support and enthusiasm for him. However, there is no telling how many of those keyboard warriors are actually Kentucky residents specifically, those that may be living in Massie's district, which is really all who matters today. As it stands, it doesn't appear his support is significant enough to overcome the Trump-endorsed Ed Gilrain, as polls and even prediction markets like our friends over at Kalshi currently have Massie looking like he's in legitimate danger of losing his seat. In fact, Gilrain is actually favored right now, and Massie is projected to lose. We'll monitor that throughout the day. Now, although we just mentioned the power of a Trump endorsement, this will be one of the more significant tests in terms of its measuring power. He was at one point one of the only people to oppose Trump, Massie, that is, that some people, not all, but some, really felt maybe able to survive it because congressional races are just inherently a smaller constituency. And up to this point, for years, it really seemed the Massie constituency liked him enough to turn a blind eye or hold out hope that the Massie-Trump feud may come to some resolution where they would both perhaps maybe even have get together or have the president endorse him. Obviously, that is not the case, and the president hasn't endorsed Ed Gilrain. And I was about saying that Massie felt this way too, given that he obviously doesn't want to lose his seat, yet obstruct the president's agenda. He may have overplayed his hand here, though, to be honest with you. I don't know if he really thought he could just take on the president and nothing would come from it in terms of losing support, or if he thought that maybe him, the president, would find common ground on something. But stand, again, Massie is projected to lose, and we never trust polls in general. We saw how wrong they've been with the president's elections. But on Kalshi, the prediction markets are, at least a little bit more telling and honest, since there is money involved there, and it shows that he is really trailing significantly to Ed Gilrain right now. And look, even if he survives this primary challenge, it'll certainly be closer than he ever imagined. I think if he does win, maybe he'll tell you that, or if he loses, maybe he will too. Right now, it looks like he's going to lose, but again, we have to see how the day plays out. Now, months ago, Massie held a steady 70% chance on the market odds to retain a seat, and even recently, as last week, had a greater than 50% chance. But it really seems down the home stretch he's lost his footing, and Gilrain is gaining momentum. I think Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, said it best yesterday, referring to Massie's insistence on voting against Trump's agenda. He said, quote, "At some point, being against everything becomes an excuse for accomplishing nothing." And again, I think that's probably the sentiment that most Massie voters feel at this point. Perhaps there are a couple of pet issues that they liked him on, but at a certain point, you realize he's voting against the Republican Party nearly 30% of the time, I believe, or at least a lot of the president's agenda. And I believe there was a tweet from Michael Knowles that you could go check out to see the exact stats on that. But that is far below the Republican median average. And I think that's going to come back to cost them or potentially haunt him today. So Massie may have some level of support, but that support undoubtedly overlaps with the president's. And this will be one of the more noteworthy primary showdowns as a result of it. So we're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. When it comes to healthcare, people are always looking for something simple: access, control, and peace of mind. And right now, that's not always easy to get. You've probably experienced it: long wait times, packed waiting rooms, dealing with insurance, and still not getting what you need when you need it. That's why more Americans are turning to All Family Pharmacy. They built a system that's simple, safe, and secure. Simple. You go online, choose what you need, and fill out a short medical form. Safe. A licensed doctor reviews your request and prescribes if appropriate. Secure. Your information and transactions are protected from start to finish. They offer access to over 400 prescription medications, from everyday maintenance meds to antibiotics, antivirals, ivermectin, NAD+, and more, all shipped directly to your door. No confusion, no delays, just a better way to get what you need. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN and use code RSBN10 to save 10%. Again, that's allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN. And don't forget to use the code RSBN10 for 10% off your order. And welcome back to Right Side Broadcasting Network. For those just tuning in, I am your host, Matt Kane. I'll be with you today and tomorrow. It's great to be here with you as always. Now, there's this disturbing video from this past weekend that's been circulating on social media. You may or may not have seen it, in a Chipotle in Washington, D.C.'s Navy Yard, which looked like a group of, again, what looked like a group of young teens really having an all-out brawl within the restaurant, exchanging blows while throwing haymakers, chairs, and even children's high chairs throughout the establishment. Now, U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., Jeanine Pirro, sounded off on how she plans to combat instances such as these in the future, and it's pretty powerful. Why don't we roll element 3?
And on Friday, I made it clear that I was going against the parents who take and refuse to take responsibility to stop this kind of thing. I said they would face consequences, and I meant it. I talked about D.C. code, and I want to reiterate, it is 22-811 that I am going to use to prosecute you for contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Parents, you are not a bystander in this crisis. The taxpayers who are footing the bill by extra policing, cleaning up damaged property, suffering the effects of these illegal gatherings, whether it be noise or fights or robberies or chaos, are done. Starting now, parents, you're paying the bills. And if you know where your teen is and what your teen is doing, and you allow them to continue their conduct and continue to allow them to flourish, then we're going to prosecute you. And you can't just say, well, I really didn't know, I'm not so sure. This is going to be a strict liability crime and a strict liability prosecution. Now, how am I going to do this? When teens are repeatedly violating the curfew, when they're repeatedly truant from school, when they possess alcohol or drugs, no matter how much, it doesn't mean that they have to be prosecuted. When they are violating a court order, or when they're already a PINS, a person in need of supervision, or committing criminal offenses like we saw in Chipotle, we're coming for you and we're coming for your parents. If your teen, parents, is a curfew violator, you're subject to a $500 fine each and every time. And if there are crimes under contributing to the delinquency of a minor, you face up to 6 months in prison. And I am not shy about looking for jail time.
So while disturbing indeed, I will say it's also unfortunately unsurprising, mainly for two reasons. First, I personally actually lived in the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C., and for all of the great things it has to offer and the potential it has, there is unfortunately a very serious crime problem. It happens quite frequently throughout the weeks, especially as the weekends commence. That what you just saw, or perhaps what you may have seen over the weekend, I saw firsthand every day. Not anything I was personally involved in. I was never victimized by any means, but you'd see these things happen a lot in that area throughout the weekend. Again, honestly, for some odd reason, a lot of young kids, it seems to always be at the center of the things that occur in Navy Yard, especially as the weekend commences. There was always a lot of activity down there, a lot of police activity, and it really is a problem. So that's the first reason why, for me personally, I wasn't fully surprised to see that, unfortunately. But the second reason it's unsurprising is because Washington, D.C., as you know, as many of you all know at this point, is a Democrat-run city. It's headed by a Democrat mayor. And just like seemingly all Democrat-run cities, there is little to no emphasis on combating crime. And in fact, with the laws or lack thereof that they have in place, one wouldn't be crazy to think that they may even be encouraging it. Now, I'm not saying they're encouraging it by any means. I'm just saying that a lot of people you hear speaking about these issues come to that conclusion, or they hold this belief that politicians, particularly again Democrat-run cities and the politicians there, for whatever reason, have no interest in combating crime, or again they feel that they almost want it to occur, again for reasons we don't know. I'm not saying that that's the case, but it's not the craziest thing when you hear people talking about that, given what you see unfold so frequently on a near daily basis in these cities. It also goes to show you that despite the president's best efforts, such as deploying the National Guard to roam the streets to act as a deterrent, which has really been a major success in many areas than not, it's just, unfortunately, there's some flawed human nature, and crime is always going to be persistent. So it's a much greater help when Democrat mayors, or really any politicians, but again, it's the Democrats that are typically in these running these cities, for if they were able to, or if they were willing to, I should say, actually play a role in combating these things and putting more tough on crime policy on the books, this would take a lot of the emphasis off of the National Guard, and they could have their resources allocated to other areas. But unfortunately, a lot of the Democrats in these cities just don't want to work with this president. It may not even be a crime issue when it comes to this president. It may just be that they don't want to align with him in any way, shape, or form. So that's certainly one of the reasons why these things continue to persist. So again, they'd be doing a great service if they decided to work with the president and adopt some of his common sense policies. But at this point, it just doesn't really seem like they have any interest in that. And that could really be a result of partisan politics above all else. It could also be ideological differences where they truly believe in these weak on crime policies. Again, we don't know the inner workings of these people's thoughts, but it seems that they've become so polarized, and their entire party platform is not anything that they actually have to offer, but instead simply opposing everything that this president has to offer, which inherently means there's very little, if anything at all, that they can agree with him on and really have their constituents vote for them. Now, in my opinion, I don't think most Democrat voters are as radical as the Democrats politicians themselves are. And I think they would actually be doing themselves a great service if they could move back to the middle and work with this president on his real common sense issues, because that's most of what he has. But at the same time, if you're a Republican voter, perhaps it's not the worst thing in the world to see them doubling down on their radical left insanity, because it's not going to help them come midterms or any other election for that matter, with 2028 somewhat looming now, just 2 years away. I will admit, however, that Navy Yard video, it was a relief to see that beyond the high chair smashing and the punches being thrown, that at least somebody in that group cared about their health to wear a mask in the year 2026. So there's evidence that you truly always can find the positive in everything. So in the spirit with the Chipotle Rebel Rousers, we're going to throw to a quick break and give you a read from one of our great sponsors, and we'll be back in just a moment, so don't go anywhere. When there are supply constraints on commodities, prices surge. You saw prices when the Strait of Hormuz was blockaded. You know what else is a limited commodity? Gold. They mine it out of the ground, and when it's gone, it's gone. Governments can't just print more of it, and that's why everyone from central banks to savvy savers are diversified with gold. If you've been thinking about it for years, but have still never moved some of your savings into physical gold, Birch Gold Group is who I trust to help you. Now through May 29th, Birch Gold is giving a first-time gold buyers a rebate of up to $10,000 on qualifying purchases. For details and a free information kit on diversifying into gold, text Trump to the number 989898. Birch Gold can help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. Text Trump to the number 989898 to see if you qualify for a first-time gold buyer rebate of up to $10,000. Again, text Trump to the number 989898. When it comes to healthcare, people are always looking for something simple: access, control, and peace of mind. And right now, that's not always easy to get. You've probably experienced it: long wait times, packed waiting rooms, dealing with insurance, and still not getting what you need when you need it. That's why more Americans are turning to All Family Pharmacy. They built a system that's simple, safe, and secure. Simple. You go online, choose what you need, and fill out a short medical form. Safe. A licensed doctor reviews your request and prescribes if appropriate. Secure. Your information and transactions are protected from start to finish. They offer access to over 400 prescription medications, from everyday maintenance meds to antibiotics, antivirals, ivermectin, NAD+, and more, all shipped directly to your door. No confusion, no delays, just a better way to get what you need. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN and use code RSBN10 to save 10%. Again, that's allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN. And don't forget to use the code RSBN10 for 10% off your order.
Welcome to Right Side Broadcasting Network, your trusted conservative news outlet. At RSBN, we deliver the truth when the mainstream media falls short. Since 2015, we've proudly broadcasted every single one of President Trump's iconic MAGA rallies, bringing you the excitement and energy live before anyone else. By watching RSBN, you get an unfiltered front-row view of the action on the ground. We interview the crowds to give a voice to millions of Americans just like you. We show you President Trump's speeches in their entirety, free from interruptions and censorship. We cover the stories that matter to you with the integrity and passion you deserve. Thank you for choosing RSBN as your home for America First News. Together, we stand strong, united, and informed. So join us and be part of the right side of history.
Hey y'all, it's Silk from Diamond and Silk Chit Chat Live. Look, don't forget to watch my show right here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, and I want you to support Right Side Broadcasting Network. It's imperative that you do so, okay? Bye-bye.
And welcome back to Right Side Broadcasting Network. I'm your host, Matt Kane. Today is Tuesday, May 19th, 2026, the 250th year of our nation's great history. Now today, Vice President J.D. Vance will be holding a press conference at 1 p.m. in the James Brady press briefing room. He's filling in today as the revolving door candidate to fill in for White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. She is out on maternity leave. She just welcomed her second child, a beautiful baby girl. So today, last week, I believe it was Marco Rubio who filled in, and this week it looks like it'll be Vice President J.D. Vance, potentially a foreshadowing of a 2028 Republican ticket, but a lot of time left to determine that. Now, just yesterday, during a visit with the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, as part of its Week of the Eagle celebration, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth administered the oath of enlistment to a handful of Screaming Eagle soldiers and also presented Purple Heart medals to 9 service members who earned those medals in some cases during actions more than 2 decades ago. So you want to show you that clip, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more. So please play element 4.
Colonel Andres Martone for wounds received on 23 March 2003. Lieutenant Colonel Sean Phillips for wound received on 23 March 2003. Lieutenant Colonel Kenneth Romaine for wound received on 23 March 2003. Major David Santos for wounds received on 23 March 2003. Captain Gian Amersolo for wound received on 23 March 2003. Sergeant Mark Pham for a wound received on 30 April 2006. Corporal Marcus Sandoval for wound received on 7 April 2006.
Been a while. Yes.
And Specialist Miguel Lopez for wound received on 2 May 2006.
I was when we got his mail. Wasn't so fast. I was a bit surprised. I've been trying to find him. Let's move it up.
Now, Secretary Hegseth stated that it is important that these medals be presented to recipients in person. He emphasized that strongly during a ceremony where there are witnesses, because for many young people today in American culture, we really celebrate, emphasize social media, popularity, and celebrities and other clout chasing, let's say, mechanisms. But a ceremony to re-enlist soldiers or honor recipients of the Purple Heart, he said, focuses the eyes back on what's most important and the true value of public service. He credited his belief and deep-rooted faith in civic rituals to his youth when tiny Memorial Day, Independence Day, and Veterans Day parades would take place in his hometown in Minnesota that even his parents attended and brought him to regularly. And it demonstrates what's truly valued by the men and women in a town that he respected so much. So even as a young man, and I think you could see that in his enthusiasm for the military and our troops, that it really resonates deeply with him and is not performative. It's not a mere act. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's been one of the top picks that the president has appointed and why the president and him get along so well in this regard. And now Hegseth went on to say that recipients should be presented with these honors in public so that Americans understand that the medal is important and that the actions that led up to the awarding of those medals were important too. And that's very important. Look, as a nation, we've been very blessed to live in a country where so many who came before us fought for our freedom, that in a sad way, and you have to stand on guard to prevent yourself from falling into this trap, but you can almost take it for granted to a certain extent because you just become so used to the freedoms that we have. But it's not a given. It's not a guarantee, as you all know. And I think having someone that leads the Department of War, such as Secretary Hegseth, who really parades and celebrates the military, is very important. And it really puts the emphasis on how these freedoms do not come free. I think that's why him and the president work so well together. Back in the president's, even prior to becoming the president, around, I believe it was the second term of Barack Obama, the president would constantly be on political talk shows, and he would express his disappointment and frustration with Barack Obama. Now, not because he ever voted or supported him, but the president conceded that he was not a supporter ever. He did not vote him. I believe he voted for John McCain, and then definitely endorsed and voted for Mitt Romney, which, as crazy as that may sound, is certainly a lesser of two evils election there for Republican voters, which the president was at the time. But he said the one thing he thought the president could do was be a great cheerleader for the country, because he was much younger than some of the prior presidents. He did have legitimate enthusiasm, albeit from the left, but also a lot of centrists in the country supported Barack Obama. And President Trump held out hope, at least in the first term of Barack Obama, that he could be a great cheerleader and unifier. And instead, the president would always infamously say he actually became a destructive force and a very divisive force throughout the country. He really pitted Americans, I should say, conservatives and Democrats against one another. Certainly a lot of the race baiting politics that you still see flowing today came from the Obama years, the Obama administration. Even First Lady Michelle Obama really has a fixation on talking about race and really not talking about much else of substance there. I think that having someone like Secretary Hegseth, again, and President Trump in office, it's really been unifying because they talk about the greatness and success of America, and that comes out naturally in their enthusiasm when they speak, and that certainly resonates with people. So when you have someone as Hegseth that is so genuinely about the nation, and especially our armed forces, it's no surprise that the president, who has just as much of an affinity, if not more, for our troops, and he also possesses a very genuine support from them, it's no surprise he would choose someone who operates on the same wavelength as he does, such as someone like Pete Hegseth. So this is why it's also unsurprising to see enrollment numbers skyrocketing once again under the leadership of President Trump, because after 4 years of decreased military enrollment numbers under the Biden administration, really due to the wokeification of our armed forces and the branch of the military that became so immersed in wokeness, numbers plummeted. And it's a dangerous prospect for the country. And obviously, we're nowhere near ever needing a draft. Thankfully, there's so many people who volunteer to put their life on the line. But after a certain period of time, I mean, I don't know how anybody could continue to serve under a woke administration that's really putting their lives at risk over nonsense. Now, I'm sure all service members will tell you they're aware of the risk that they take. Part of the oath they take is willing to give up their life if necessary. But again, nobody wants to do that, and no president wants to lose lives. But it really seems like in the last administration, the wokeness really just took away the spirit of the armed forces. And that's something that absolutely needs to be there if people are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. There has to be something that makes them feel like they're serving for a worthy cause. And that just isn't the case, unfortunately, when you have these woke administration officials in there that really kneecap a lot of our armed forces. So it's great to see the enrollment numbers are back up under President Trump, and that really acts as a deterrent. When the world knows that America is a strong and unified force, it certainly will deter them from taking hostile actions towards America and its allies as well. So very good to see Secretary Hegseth leading the charge and spearheading the patriotism at the top. So we're going to throw to a quick break, but then we'll be right back. So don't go anywhere. Right before Vice President Vance, gives a press briefing in the James Brady briefing room. So we'll be right back. You've heard us talk about Cove Pure before, and if the water scares in East Palestine weren't enough to get you to make the switch, well, this might. Over 176 million Americans are drinking tap water with PFAs in it. They're man-made chemicals used in food packaging, nonstick cookware, firefighting foam, and more. Scientists call them forever chemicals because once they're in your body, they stay there. They don't break down, and they're linked to hormone disruption, immune damage, and increased cancer risk. But here's the part that should make you angry. The EPA set legal limits for PFAs in drinking water back in 2024, but water systems have until 2031 to comply. That's a whole 5 years from now. Until that deadline arrives, a utility can be operating above the legal limit right now and isn't required to notify you. You're just drinking it. That's why every single household needs Cove Pure. The government knows these chemicals are harmful enough to regulate. They're just not making anyone act on it yet, which means if you want clean, healthy water, you're going to have to do it yourself. Cove Pure was engineered exactly for this. Unlike the normal pitcher fillers you get at the store, their Clearwave reverse osmosis technology is a certified system to remove up to 99.9% of contaminants, PFAs, heavy metals, fluoride, pharmaceuticals, filtering particles hundreds of thousands of times smaller than a single human hair. And the best part about Cove Pure is they make it so easy. It sits right on your countertop. You don't have to drill any holes or call a plumber. You just plug it in. You can even get whatever temperature water you want, hot, cold, warm, with a tap of a button. Don't wait for 2031. Take control of your water quality right now. Head to covepure.com/RSBN. And because you're a listener of the show, you'll get $250 off right now. That's covepure.com/RSBN. All right, so let's look at what the markets are saying on Kalshi regarding the 2028 Republican primary and Republican nomination. Looks like as of today, Vice President J.D. Vance has a very slight marginal lead over Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Be sure to go to kalshi.com/RSBN or scan the QR code on your screen to look at all the live odds and prediction markets looking into the future of American politics. And welcome back to Right Side Broadcasting Network on this Tuesday, May 19th, in the year of our Lord 2026, the 250th year of our nation's great history. Again, for those just tuning in, we are awaiting Vice President J.D. Vance delivering a press briefing in Caroline Leavitt's absence as the White House press secretary, as she's on maternity leave, welcoming in a new baby to her beautiful family. Last week, it was Secretary of State Marco Rubio who put on another hat in hosting a press briefing, which provided no shortage of memes and social media content, as it always does whenever there's a new role given that he does legitimately hold about 4 positions at one point, perhaps a little bit less now. And Rubio really wears many hats. So last week, it was the role of being the acting press secretary for a day. Today, it's Vice President J.D. Vance, who likely will talk about a lot of the fraud findings that he has found and uncovered early on in the White House task force that he has been heading. Now, yesterday, the president hosted a Trump RX healthcare savings cost event on affordability to tout new programs that are saving Americans thousands of dollars on medicine, thanks in large part to the president's most favored nation status implementation that has lowered costs significantly for the American people. Now, an unlikely source accompanied him on stage yesterday, coming out in strong support of the work being done by the president, at least on this front. I won't say who, I'm sure most of you saw that, but for those who have not seen it, we'll let it be a surprise for you, just in case you didn't happen to see that. So let's roll elements 5 and 6, and we'll get back in just a minute.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here on this very beautiful day. A lot of very positive things happening. Less than 4 months ago, I stood before you to announce the launch of the TrumpRx.gov, a brand new website featuring the largest discounts on prescription drugs in the history of our country, the history, frankly, of any country. And for decades, Americans paid the highest drug prices anywhere in the world by far. But under the most favored nation agreements I negotiated, we now pay the lowest price paid for anybody in any country. We went from the highest to the lowest, and I think outside of maybe a cure itself, it's the biggest thing to happen to healthcare and everything having to do with medical in any way, shape, or form. There's never been anything like this. We think of it, we went from the most expensive to the least expensive. So we've slashed the price of dozens of commonly used prescription drugs by differences of 400, 500, and even 600%. In my first term, I got it down 1/8 of 1%. It's the first time in 28 years it went down 1/8 of 1, and now we're talking about 4, 5, and 6, and even 700%, including for weight loss drugs, fertility treatments, insulin, and much, much more. Since that launch in February, TrumpRx.gov has already been visited more than 10 million times and has saved American consumers over $400 million already, and it's truly the hottest thing in medicine. It's been amazing. I asked Dr. Oz, how's it doing? Bobby was there. He said, nobody's ever seen anything like this, so it's great. People are saving a lot of money. Over the next 10 years, the Council of Economic Advisors estimates that our most favored nation drug policies will save Americans over $500 billion. And this has been the greatest breakthrough in lowering health care costs in modern history. But we're just sort of getting started, actually, because we have a lot more to come. So today I'm thrilled to announce that we're increasing the number of drugs available on TrumpRx by nearly 7 times, adding over 600 affordable generics to the website, working with industry partners. Cost-effective generic drugs are often available at just a tiny fraction of the price of their brand name equivalents, and in theory, they're the same thing. Sometimes they're better, with the same dosage, the same effectiveness, and the same active ingredients, yet many consumers do not think to ask for them. They don't know about them. By incorporating this massive catalog of low-cost generics at TrumpRx.gov, consumers will now have one source to ensure that they're getting the lowest possible cost on their prescription. So they have a real option now. Today, they have something that they've never had before. They've never had anything like this or even close. With these additions, TrumpRx will feature the best and lowest prices on prescriptions used by tens of millions of Americans already. And in some cases, the discounted generics available through TrumpRx may be offered at an even lower cash price than the out-of-pocket insurance cost, which has always been the lowest, but we're going to be lower. This means that the TrumpRx.gov should always be your first stop before you go to the pharmacy to pick up your prescription, and you'll certainly be checking on your pharmacy by doing this, and at a minimum, you'll know what you're supposed to be paying. I want to thank the leaders of several major pharmacies and generic drug makers who are partnering with us on this effort, including the co-founder of Cost Plus Drugs, Mark Cuban. Mark, thank you very much. Mark, looking good, Mark. Come here, Mark. Nice to be with you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. We have the same thing, one thing in common. We want to make people better and keep them wealthy, right? Good. Good to be with you. Vice President of Amazon Pharmacy, Tanvi Patel. Thank you very much. And the president of RX Marketplace at GoodRx, Aaron Crittenden. Aaron, thank you very much. Great job you're doing. With these companies as partners, we're also getting and adding new tools to take over websites which will connect patients with the lowest price pharmacy right in their own neighborhood, or alternatively give them the option of getting a discounted prescription shipped straight to their door. They can have it delivered right to their front door. This will provide American consumers with new options, more savings, and unprecedented price transparency, putting billions and billions of dollars back into the pockets of hardworking Americans. What a difference it's going to make at the end of a week. For generations, drug prices have only gone up, and under my administration, for the first time in history, drug prices are coming down, and they are coming down very, very dramatically and substantially. Politicians from both parties promised for decades to make health care more affordable, but they all failed, every single one of them. And when they thought they had it, they couldn't get other countries to go along. I got all the other countries to come along. I said, you don't come along, we're going to tariff you. And they all said, we'd love to come along, sir. But I'm actually getting it done, and I don't care how I do it. I got to get it done for the people. I want to thank the incredible team behind this historic accomplishment, including Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Bobby, Administrator for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Dr. Mehmet Oz. What a team this is. And Chief Counselor of Health and Human Services, Chris Klump. And I also especially have to thank the genius behind the world-class website that will soon be serving hundreds of millions of Americans, Airbnb co-founder and Chief Design Officer of the United States, Joe Gebbia, who's really amazing, and Ed Korstein, and the team at the National Design Studio, which is as good as you get. Under my America by Design executive order, Joe and his design team have been working to make your government more beautiful, more modern, convenient, and effective. In addition to the TrumpRx website, they've built the amazing experience behind TrumpAccounts.gov and the new food pyramid, Freedom 250, and much more. They're doing a job for the country like I can say design-wise nobody has ever seen.
When there are supply constraints on commodities, prices surge. You saw it with fuel prices when the Strait of Hormuz was blockaded. You know what else is a limited commodity? Gold. They mine it out of the ground. When it's gone, it's gone. Governments can't just print more of it, and that's why everyone from central banks to savvy savers are diversified with gold. If you've been thinking about it for years, but have still never moved some of your savings into physical gold, Birch Gold Group is who I trust to help you. Now through May 29th, Birch Gold is giving a first-time gold buyers a rebate of up to $10,000 on qualifying purchases. For details and a free information kit on diversifying into gold, text Trump to the number 989898. Birch Gold can help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. Text Trump to the number 989898 to see if you qualify for a first-time gold buyer rebate of up to $10,000. Again, text Trump to the number 989898. When it comes to healthcare, people are always looking for something simple: access, control, and peace of mind. And right now, that's not always easy to get. You've probably experienced it. Long wait times, packed waiting rooms, dealing with insurance, and still not getting what you need when you need it. That's why more Americans are turning to All Family Pharmacy. They built a system that's simple, safe, and secure. Simple. You go online, choose what you need, and fill out a short medical form. Safe. A licensed doctor reviews your request and prescribes if appropriate. Secure. Your information and transactions are protected from start to finish. They offer access to over 400 prescription medications, from everyday maintenance meds to antibiotics, antivirals, ivermectin, NAD+, and more, all shipped directly to your door. No confusion, no delays, just a better way to get what you need. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN and use code RSBN10 to save 10%. Again, that's allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN. And don't forget to use the code RSBN10 for 10% off your order.
Thank you, Mr. President. The epidemic of chronic disease in this country is now existential. If you include my agency plus Social Security and the VA, Americans now spend 48 cents out of every dollar that we spend in federal taxes now go to health care. 90% of that is for chronic disease. And those costs are increasing at 2% at greater speed than the GDP. In addition to that, it poses an existential threat to our national security. 77% of American kids cannot qualify for military service. President Trump has pledged to end the chronic disease epidemic, but in the meantime, many people need medications to treat their chronic disease. And President Trump has asked us to make this, our country, the most affordable medication in the world, and he succeeded in doing that. And I want to say one last thing. President Bush promised to do this. President Clinton promised to do it. President Biden promised to do it. President Obama promised to do it. President Trump actually got it done. And it's an extraordinary accomplishment. It's an extraordinary legacy for him, and it's a gift to the American people. And I want to thank you again for your vision and for your determination.
This is yet another example of this administration, of the president's leadership, making life more affordable. And it's in a particularly important arena because almost 1 in 3 Americans, when they go to a drugstore, cannot afford to pick up the medications that their doctor prescribed for them. And part of the reason for that, which the president recognized early on and pushed hard until it got done, because it was a force of his personality that allowed us to go to all the major pharmaceutical companies representing the vast majority of the marketplace of branded drugs in America. But what he realized was we're paying 3 times more for the exact same drugs made in the same facilities, often in this country, than people overseas are paying for those exact same drugs. Whether it's weight loss drugs, fertility drugs, you name it, we're overpaying for it. President wanted that stopped. He wanted it to stop now. And so he did it. The most favored nation drug pricing approach works using a variety of techniques that he outlined, but we needed to make sure you had an ability to access these drugs. TrumpRx.gov is a phenomenon. Over 10 million people have visited the site. It is the fastest site of its kind I've ever seen. As a physician who's used to looking at medications and having no idea what the patient will pay, it's as transparent as you just saw, built by the fantastic team with Joe Gebbia. They started with dozens of medications, Mr. President, which is the number of medications that had been negotiated by Chris Klump and the team at HHS. Today, 601 more medications were added. 601 more. As the president said, 7 times more drugs are now in this list, which means something really important. You should not buy a drug in America without first checking the best transparency site ever created for medications to make sure you're not being taken advantage of. You wouldn't go grocery shopping without knowing prices. You wouldn't buy a car without knowing prices, lease an apartment or anything else. You shouldn't do it with the medications that could save your life. We believe that more than half of all the prescription interactions in America are now going to be revealed on Trump RX. If you wish to use the site in any capacity, this is a time to start. It's a technological feat. It's created transparency with no middlemen, just what the president promised. And for that reason, we ask you today to go look at the site, TrumpRx.gov. Ask us to put you on our mailing list. So when the team at the National Design Studio wants to contact you about new medications that are being offered, new ways for you to save money, new ways for you to make health more affordable, so your zip code doesn't determine your health, you'll have TrumpRx.gov to go to. Mark Cuban has been an outspoken advocate for more transparency in medications. He built a business around it, and he's one of the companies that's joining us now to put their products on TrumpRx.gov. Mark.
Thank you for having me, Mr. President. I think other than you, I've been the biggest proponent of TrumpRx.com. And the reason for that is Republicans want cheaper drugs, independents want cheaper drugs, Democrats want cheaper drugs, and together, I think we're going to do something special. What makes Cost Plus Drugs different is that when you click through TrumpRx to our site, not only will you see a great price, but you'll see our actual cost and that we only mark it up 15%. And what makes this incredible, Mr. President, all the volume and all the people that are going to come from the site, as our volumes go up, our costs go down, which means we'll be ending up charging less to people over a period of time. So this is a special announcement. This is a special partnership. 559 of those drugs are ours, so we're really excited to be part of this. Thank you so much for having me.
You've heard us talk about Cove Pure before, and if the water scares in Flint and East Palestine weren't to make the switch, well, this might. Over 176 million Americans are drinking tap water with PFAs in it. They're man-made chemicals used in food packaging, nonstick cookware, firefighting foam, and more. Scientists call them forever chemicals because once they're in your body, they stay there. They don't break down, and they're linked to hormone disruption, immune damage, and increased cancer risk. But here's the part that should make you angry. The EPA set legal limits for PFAs in drinking water back in 2024, but water systems have until 2031 to comply. That's a whole 5 years from now. Until that deadline arrives, a utility can be operating above the legal limit right now and isn't required to notify you. You're just drinking it. That's why every single household needs Cove Pure. The government knows these chemicals are harmful enough to regulate. They're just not making anyone act on it yet, which means if you want clean, healthy water, you're going to have to do it yourself. Cove Pure was engineered exactly for this. Unlike the normal pitcher fillers you get at the store, their Clearwave reverse osmosis technology is a certified system to remove up to 99.9% of contaminants, PFAS, heavy metals, fluoride, pharmaceuticals, filtering particles hundreds of thousands of times smaller than a single human hair. And the best part about Cove Pure is they make it so easy. It sits right on your countertop. You don't have to drill any holes or call a plumber. You just plug it in. You can even get whatever temperature water you want, hot, cold, warm, with a tap of a button. Don't wait for 2031. Take control of your water quality right now. Head to covepure.com/RSBN. And because you're a listener of the show, you'll get $250 off right now. That's covepure.com/RSBN. All right, so let's look at what the markets are saying on Kalshi regarding the 2028 Republican primary and Republican nomination. Looks like as of today, Vice President J.D. Vance has a very slight marginal lead over Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Be sure to go to kalshi.com/RSBN or scan the QR code on your screen to look at all the live odds and prediction markets looking into the future of American politics. So you see right there, Mark Cuban accompanying the president on stage, and he is really not only a very unlikely source, but you can make the argument one of the most unlikely sources that you'll see. Now, the president, obviously, you've seen many times throughout both terms having a relatively unexpected character, sometimes joining forces with him while in the White House, and the president always does a great job of extending an olive branch, despite what some people may feel. We'll get more to that in a little bit. But Mark Cuban really is one of the least expected people you would ever see. Obviously, on this issue, as you just heard them talk about, there's a lot of common ground here, so it's nice to see them put any differences aside to work together. But Cuban's criticism of Trump goes all the way back to his first term. I believe he may have been initially supportive of what the president was proposing. He wasn't the president at the time, but very shortly after, before he even beat Hillary Clinton, he claimed that Trump had some, quote, good ideas, but also accused him of being lazy and not really willing to put in the work, which I think, obviously yesterday, Mark Cuban said he did not want to talk about his personal politics, but I think it's safe to say he would even have to admit that aged quite poorly. In fact, it may be one of the worst takes ever given, considering how long it's been proven now the president does not rest. And again, I'd say that aged quite poorly for Cuban. And really, you even saw Caitlin Collins, someone who's kind of adversarial, working definitely for an adversarial network, who has oftentimes sparred with the president, not only before he returned to office for a second term, but even sometimes during taking questions from the press in his first term. And even after coming into office, there's been no shortage of back and forth that are a little bit more hostile between the president, Caitlin Collins. And she said during a very recent podcast appearance, I believe, that the president does not sleep. And even members of the press and media on these long overseas trips don't get much sleep, because when he calls them to speak, and interact with them, they're usually trying to get their last bits of sleep they can before a long overseas trip, but he does not. He's pretty much working all the time. So that was a long time ago. Obviously, it looks like they buried the hatchet enough to work together on this. But Mark Cuban was not somebody who was ever supportive of, in fact, open him. For me, Cuban floated as someone who may potentially someday run for the presidency or some form of high office, given his wealth, much like the president was. In fact, about 10, 15 years ago, they were always both floated as people who may run, but he never actually did. And I think due to this, again, this is just my opinion, I've always felt that Cuban obviously doesn't align with the president on a lot of politics, but I also think there's a lot of jealousy rooted there, because he sees Trump as having the courage to do something that he's never pulled the trigger on. Again, that's just my observation looking from afar without having any insight into the situation. But again, I think yesterday was noteworthy for many reasons, because as of yesterday, at least, you saw a very happy and complimentary Cuban for what the president's working on in terms of lowering drug costs. And it's not just noteworthy because of the issue. It's actually because not only did Cuban endorse Kamala Harris passively or kind of at the last hour, but he was actively and aggressively campaigning on her behalf, not just touting what he thought was positive about her, but really railing on what he believed was negative about this president. And that's where I really think that the president does a great job of extending olive branches, because those were some harsh words exchanged by both Cuban and I guess at times the president himself. Now, yesterday he mentioned that he's always been a fan of Mark, which again, the president's always very complimentary. Once fences are mended, he's always willing to find common ground with people. But I think it's certainly telling and really hits back on the notion that the people that frankly Cuban endorsed were hitting on. I mean, he said that, in supporting Kamala Harris, he was supporting a group that would claim that the person leading her party, that Trump is so tyrannical and would be a would-be dictator, and yet Cuban's presence on a stage with that man, that he actively campaigned against, very nastily at times, harshly criticized many times over, really put him completely in lockstep with the same far left that claimed that he'd be all these things. And his presence on that stage yesterday actually just shows how wrong they were, and by extension himself, because if the president were any of those things, this harsh dictator that wants to go after anybody that crosses him or says anything negative about him, there's no way he would extend even the slightest of olive branches towards somebody like Mark Cuban, let alone actively work together with him and welcome him and say such great things about him publicly at a White House event while holding the office that many claimed he would weaponize, which is obviously not the case. So I don't believe the president gets enough credit for mending fences. And look, MAGA people are very unforgiving. I understand that. I identify with that. I am one of them. And in fact, sometimes I think MAGA and the base is more unforgiving than the president is. And so I doubt that any Mark Cuban supporters on the MAGA side of yesterday's event. But again, it is noteworthy to see that for all the things they say about the president, he's always willing to find common ground with people if it really works. And you heard the president say just before, the one thing they do have in common, I like that he said the one thing because it really signals there isn't much beyond there. But he said the one thing we do have in common is that we want to make the country better. We want to make people healthier and make things more affordable. So again, very, very small windows where people find common ground sometime. And in fact, you just look at Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That is not a man who the president is aligned with on most politics. I'm sure you look back when Kennedy announced his 2024 candidacy, he obviously tried to run as a Democrat, and the party blocked him and prevented him from doing so. And there really isn't much overlap there. A lot of the really core issues, at least in Kennedy's past, he may have changed on it now, but not a very big Second Amendment supporter. There were a lot of other issues that they differed on. And the one thing that they really did agree on, however, was health and nutrition that the country needs, specifically in terms of what's in the food and the vaccines. And so the president had no problem really finding 10% common ground with one person and pointing him to the position where that 1% really overlaps with what he felt. And that's what this president's done. It's really been a unity party and a unity administration. You're seeing that across the board. You look at someone like Tulsi Gabbard, again, a prior Democrat. She did come out just before the election, officially re-register as a Republican with the party, but obviously, ideologically, for most of her career, she's been a Democrat, where there is not really a lot of overlap with Republicans these days. But one issue she was very openly willing to speak on was the Russia collusion hoax. And as a result, the president puts her in charge of national intelligence, where a lot of those things can be analyzed. So again, this president is really always willing to find even small amounts of common ground. And I think that goes back to his deal-making days as a businessman in New York, where you really just need to find people to work with. And you just saw that with the state visit to China. He mentioned that the core purpose of the trip was not even necessarily the specifics. It's about relationship building. And then from there, you can get into specifics. So the president just continues to really show what he's really about, and not about what the news portrays him as. So if there is any positive that, the MAGA faithful can find from the Mark Cuban appearance yesterday, number one, it's that it's obviously a very great thing, the rollout that they're doing with Trump RX lower cost. But secondly, if anyone still cares about what the fake news media says, it does really put a chink in their armor in terms of how they portray this president as being someone that's so cutthroat, not willing to work with anybody, when one of his most open critics was there accompanying him on stage yesterday. So I think that's a positive in terms of debunking the false claims against him. So we're going to take another quick break. For those just tuning in, we are waiting on Vice President J.D. Vance acting as White House press secretary today. We're not sure exactly what he'll speak about, but be sure to tune in. Stay with us up until that point. We're going to be bringing you coverage all throughout the day until the vice president's ready. So a quick break from our sponsors, but don't go anywhere. When there are supply constraints on commodities, prices surge. You saw it with fuel prices when the Strait of Hormuz was blockaded. You know what else is a limited commodity? Gold. They mine it out of the ground, and when it's gone, it's gone. Governments can't just print more of it, and that's why everyone from central banks to savvy savers are diversified with gold. If you've been thinking about it for years, but have still never moved some of your savings into physical gold, Birch Gold Group is who I trust to help you. Now through May 29th, Birch Gold is giving a first-time gold buyers a rebate of up to $10,000 on qualifying purchases. For details and a free information kit on diversifying into gold, text Trump to the number 989898. Birch Gold can help you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold. Text Trump to the number 989898 to see if you qualify for a first-time gold buyer rebate of up to $10,000. Again, text Trump to the number 989898. When it comes to healthcare, people are always looking for something simple: access, control, and peace of mind. And right now, that's not always easy to get. You've probably experienced it: long wait times, packed waiting rooms, dealing with insurance, and still not getting what you need when you need it. That's why more Americans are turning to All Family Pharmacy. They built a system that's simple, safe, and secure. Simple: you go online, choose what you need, and fill out a short medical form. Safe: a licensed doctor reviews your request and prescribes if appropriate. Secure: your information and transactions are protected from start to finish. They offer access to over 400 prescription medications, from everyday maintenance meds to antibiotics, antivirals, ivermectin, NAD+, and more, all shipped directly to your door. No confusion, no delays, just a better way to get what you need. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN and use code RSBN10 to save 10%. Again, that's allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN. And don't forget to use the code RSBN10 for 10% off your order.
Chuck Adams grabbed his clubs about 9:15. Every Thursday morning, rain or shine, he's headed to the course with some golf on his mind. Me, I pull in slow to the country club gate, coffee in hand, always running late, with a smile and a grin and a ball to a tee. It's game time, boys, just Chuck and me. We take 2 shots off the tee, that's how we roll. One for the scorecard, one for the soul. Mulligans fly like sweet iced tea at Saugahatchee, where we feel free. Laughing, lying, shanking a few. It ain't just golf, it's what we do. Chuck Adams swings with grace and glee every Thursday. Just him and me. He's got a sun-stained hat and a heart of gold. Stories from the fairway that never get old. Tells me about a church and a sweet Carissa tune. Then he dumps his wedge and we laugh like fools. Lunch at the turn with a burger and fries, talking about the Lord and college football ties. Yeah, we keep score, but we don't need proof. When you're playing with Chuck, the joy's the truth. We take 2 shots off the tee, that's how we roll. One for the scorecard, one for the soul. Mulligans fly like sweet iced tea at Saugahatchee, where we feel free. Laughing, lying, shanking a few. It ain't just golf, it's what we do. Chuck Adams swings with grace and glee every Thursday. Just him and me. So here's to the greens and the stories we share, to the slice in the woods and not a single care. If you ever need joy or a brotherly hug, just come tee it up with old Chuck. We take 2 shots off the tee, that's how we roll. One for the scorecard, one for the soul. Mulligans fly like sweet iced tea at Saugahatchee, where we feel free. Yeah, that's our game, it always will be. Chuck Adams and me, wild and free. milkshakes and dreams online, trying to build that beach body line. Sign 'em up, stack 'em deep, watch that downline grow in my sleep. Jake said, man, I gotta leave. Friend signed up, said he's what you need. Then he said, my mama's in it too. I said, what's her name? He said, Barbara, come and need to. Barbara, come and need to. Barbara, come and need to. I don't know why, but it hit me like bad news. Didn't make sense, but I swear it's true. That name alone made my stomach turn blue. Barbara, come and need to. Lord, forgive me, I don't mean to be rude. I ain't done a thing that a good soul wouldn't do, but something about that name just tore me in two. I tried to smile, tried to play it cool like a businessman's supposed to do, but I swallowed hard and looked away, felt my lunch creeping up that day. Ain't her fault, she's probably kind, just one of those things you can't define. Like nails on a chalkboard out of the blue, that name kept ringing, Barbara, come and need to. Barbara, come and need to. Barbara, come and need to. Echoed in my head like a bad tattoo. Didn't know why it messed me up so, but I felt it deep down in my soul. Barbara, come and need to. I'd take a loss before I'd say it again to you. Ain't proud of the way I came unglued, but I can't outrun Barbara, come and need to. Now I've met a lot of folks in this life, someone names that cut like a knife, but none ever hit me quite like that day when that name just knocked me sideways. Barbara, come and need to. Barbara, come and need to. Still don't know why it messed me up like it do. She's probably out there living just fine, while I'm haunted by a name in my mind. Barbara, come and need to. If you're out there, I apologize to you. It ain't personal, just something I can't undo. That strange old feeling, Barbara, come and need to.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. How you guys doing? Good. Good. Okay, I've got my cheat sheet here, so I know who to call on. Most importantly, who not to call on. Let me start out with a few things. So first of all, proud to announce that next week I will be speaking at the Air Force Academy commencement ceremony. Last year I spoke at the Naval Academy commencement ceremony, and it was one of the great honors and privileges of my life. So I'm excited to go out there to Colorado and participate in that ceremony. The second thing is I want to highlight a little bit some of the work that we've been doing, the great work our team has been doing on the anti-fraud task force, where we have caught just in the last couple of months billions upon billions of dollars of fraud in our hospice system, in our Medicaid system, in our Medicare system, in our immigration system. We've seen hundreds of millions of dollars of fraudulent loans that were being handed out through the Small Business Administration that we've identified and stopped. And we've also started investigating some of the fraudulent criminal activity and also prosecuting some of the fraudulent criminal activity. So the thing that I say to the American people, and I'll repeat here to all of you, is, fraud is a crime that has two victims. It has, first of all, the American taxpayer, people who pay their taxes, who out of their generosity, and because they have to, of course, they pay their taxes expecting that it's going to go to pay our troops and ensure that low-income children have access to food and ensure that people get medical benefits even if they're not able to afford a doctor. I think it's a great thing about our country is that we have this generosity of spirit where we take care of one another, but fraud takes that away from us because it steals money from the taxpayer when they pay their taxes, and it also steals money from innocent people who are meant to benefit from these programs but can't when the money runs dry because it's gone to fraudsters instead of the people who benefit from it or should benefit from it. So we're going to keep that work up. The President of the United States has been very clear that he wants us to focus on fraud. He wants us to prosecute the fraudsters, and he wants us to save the American people as much money as we possibly can. So we're going to keep at it. We're very proud of that work, and importantly, very proud of the team who've done an incredible job. And then finally, just to give an update on the Iran negotiation, the Iran situation, I just talked to the president very briefly before I came out here. It's actually a very simple proposition here. There are two options, two pathways we can go down when it comes to the Iran situation. So step back for a little bit. What the President of the United States has said is, number one, Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. And I think it's important for the American people and all of you to appreciate that when we say that, it's not just that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, it's what would happen if the Iranians did get a nuclear weapon. We know that a lot of nations all across the Gulf would then want their own nuclear weapon, and then a lot of nations all across the world. And what has been a very effective bright spot of American foreign policy really for the last 20 or so years would disappear overnight. If you have every country in the world scrambling to try to get a nuclear weapon, it would make us all much less safe. And Iran would really be the first domino and what would set off a nuclear arms race all over the world. That's very, very bad for the safety of our country. As the father of 3 young kids, I don't want them to inherit a world where 20 additional regimes, half of them very dangerous and very sympathetic to terrorists, have nuclear weapons. We want to keep the number of countries that have nuclear weapons small, and that's why Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, on top of all the other things that we might be worried about, that they themselves could use it, that they could use it in leverage in economic control or economic negotiations. We just don't want them to have a nuclear weapon. Now, what we did here is that we effectively degraded their conventional military capability. That has been done. That has been successfully done. You could always do a little bit more, but where we are now is the president has asked us, has told us to aggressively negotiate with the Iranians. Why did I go to Islamabad, Pakistan? Why did I spend, I think, probably 22 hours on a plane going there, 24 hours coming back, and then 21 hours on the ground negotiating with the Iranians? Is because we wanted to show a sign of good faith. The Vice President of the United States is willing to cut a deal so long as the Iranians are willing to meet us again on that core issue of never having a nuclear weapon. We think that we've made a lot of progress. We think the Iranians want to make a deal. The President of the United States has asked us to negotiate in good faith, and that's exactly what we've done. So we're in a pretty good spot here, but there's an option B. And the option B is that we could restart the military campaign to continue to prosecute the case, to continue to try to achieve America's objectives. And we could talk a little bit about what that looks like, but that's not what the president wants, and I don't think it's what the Iranians want either. We have an opportunity here, I think, to reset the relationship that has existed between Iran and the United States for 47 years. That's what the president has asked us to do, and that's what we're going to keep on working at. But it takes two to tango. We are not going to have a deal that allows the Iranians to have a nuclear weapon. So as the president just told me, we're locked and loaded. We don't want to go down that pathway, but the president is willing and able to go down that pathway if we have to. So with that, I will say thank you all. It's cool to be here. I'm going to give a shout out, of course, to the person I am replacing today, Carolyn Levitt, who hopefully is at home enjoying some time with her beautiful kids. I told Carolyn I would stand in for her today for the White House press briefing on the condition that when Usha has our baby in July, that she would be vice president for a couple weeks. So thank you, guys. And I actually want to start first with Nick from Breitbart. Nick, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you. Today we saw the president endorse Ken Paxton over John Cornyn in the Texas Senate race. Do you think that sends a message going forward for the next cycle to senators, considering running for re-election, or any MAGA-aligned potential candidates that are considering challenging them?
Well, I'd say a couple things, Nick. First of all, I think the president's very gratified by the response that he's heard from the base and from a lot of voters, I think, who are passionate about Ken Paxton. We think Ken Paxton is going to be a great senator for the people of Texas, but most importantly, a great United States senator who can work on solving the problems that all of us confront as a country together. I've known John Cornyn for a long time, but unfortunately, when it really counted, Ken Paxton was there for the country, was there for the president, and that's why he ultimately earned the president's endorsement. He thinks he's going to be a better senator, thinks he's going to make a better candidate, and so I do think it sends a message, but really not just the endorsement, but one of the things the president has done very effectively, going back 10 years in his leadership of the Republican Party and the country as President of the United States, is he said, I want people who fight for the good. I want people who can't be bought by corporate lobbyists, who can't be bought by Wall Street, who can't be bought by special interests, who are going to go to Washington and fight for the people who actually elected them to those positions. And I think one of the things we've seen in the Republican Party, while I can't say that all of our representatives are perfect or all of our senators are perfect, we have seen a much better crop of talent come into Washington since Donald Trump has been the leader of the party and the leader of the movement. I do think we're going to continue to see that happening. But I think the message that people should take from this is fundamentally, you have got to serve the people who sent you. And if you don't do that, you're going to find yourself out of step with voters or out of step with the President of the United States, and that's not a good place to be politically.
Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Just following up on what you just said, you said that the White House is negotiating with Iran in good faith. I think Americans tend to believe that, but what is it about the Iranian side that you personally have seen where you believe that they are negotiating with us in good faith?
Well, first of all, I'd say it's a very complicated country, and it's a country that I wouldn't pretend that I understand even after as deep as I've been involved in this process from the very beginning. It's a great and proud civilization, amazing people. We obviously have a great Iranian American community here in the United States of America, smart people, very hardworking, and you see some of that in the negotiating team on the other side. You also see some very hardline positions in the negotiating team on the other side, and so I think you see that conflict, the fact that maybe the Iranians aren't themselves quite clear in what direction they want to go to. They also are just a fractured country. So you have the leadership of the country, there's the supreme leader, and then there are a lot of officials below the supreme leader that has some influence in the negotiation. It's not sometimes totally clear what the negotiating position of the team is. And I don't know if that's sometimes bad communication, if that's bad faith. I wouldn't pretend to venture a guess there, but I will say with confidence, it's sometimes hard to figure out exactly what it is that the Iranians want to accomplish out of the negotiation. So what we've done is tried to be as clear as possible. What are our red lines? What are the things that we're willing to be accommodating on? And what are the things that we absolutely must have? And as the president has said ad nauseum, and I think I've said it a lot too, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. We want to see not just the commitment to not have a nuclear weapon, but the commitment to work with us on a process to ensure that not just now, not just when Donald Trump is president, but years down the road that the Iranians are not rebuilding that nuclear capability. And that's what we're trying to accomplish in the negotiation. Sorry, you had a follow-up.
Yeah, just for Americans at home, because this has been going on for several weeks now. I think what people just want to know is, do you personally believe that the Iranians will come to a deal? Because we keep seeing this over and over again where they go back and forth.
So do I personally believe it? The honest answer is, how could I possibly know, right? And you negotiate with people, and sometimes you feel like you're making progress, and sometimes you feel like you're not making progress. What I think is that the Iranians want to make a deal. What I think is that the Iranians recognize that a nuclear weapon is the red line for the United States of America, that they've internalized that. But we're not going to know until we're actually putting pen to paper on signing a deal. We've had a lot of drafts, a lot of pieces of paper going back and forth, but I will not say with confidence that we're going to reach a deal until we're actually signing a negotiated settlement here. And I think that it's ultimately up to the Iranians whether they're willing to meet us, because I think we're certainly doing a good job and we're certainly negotiating in good faith. We're going to have to see what ultimately happens with them. I can't say with confidence because I don't know what's in the mind of the other side. John?
Mr. Vice President, thank you. I want to ask you about that $1.8 billion fund set up, weaponization fund as it's being called. Why should taxpayers be paying to settle a $10 billion lawsuit that was brought by the President of the United States? And should people that attacked the Capitol building and assaulted police officers, should they be eligible? Should they receive money? Should they receive money from this fund?
Well, let me say a couple things about that. First, John, I think in some ways the media has misrepresented what this is actually about. This is about compensating Americans for the lawfare that we saw under the last administration. And by the way, anybody can apply for it. Republicans can apply for it. Democrats can apply for it. As you know, the President of the United States has pardoned a number of Democrats who he felt were actually subject to this lawfare. I mean, if Hunter Biden wants to apply for this particular fund, he is welcome to. It's going to go through a normal process where we vet everything, where we try to identify whether people's claims are actually legitimate. But here's the question. You say, why should taxpayers fund this? Whenever the United States government incurs legal expenses, it pays out those legal expenses. When it's settling a lawsuit, it pays out money to settle that lawsuit. And the question is a dollar of this money going to the Trump administration? No. Is a dollar of this money going to Donald Trump personally? No. Is a dollar of this money going to Donald Trump's family? No. The people that would get the money are people, some of whom have been prosecuted completely disproportionate to any crime they've ever committed. Like, let's just take a couple of examples. Tina Peters is this woman who is about to get out of prison, thanks in large part to the president's good work in Colorado. This is a woman who, at worst, if you believe everything that the prosecutors said about her, committed misdemeanor trespassing, and somebody threw the book at her. This innocent grandmother was going to spend 10 years in prison, completely disproportionate to any misdemeanor trespassing that I've ever seen. Was that fair? No. Is it reasonable for her to get some compensation for the fact that she was treated unfairly? I think the answer is yes, and I think that what we're going to see, hopefully, is the entire country, led by this Department of Justice, turning the page on the lawfare. What I would like to propose, and I think the Democrats, hopefully they're willing to meet us halfway here. I won't hold my breath. But what I would propose is something very simple, that if you are willing to turn the page on Joe Biden's lawfare, why don't we prosecute people? Very simple principle. Why don't we prosecute people who violate the law? Let's not prosecute people because they said the wrong thing or because they had the wrong political candidate or because they had the wrong viewpoint. And I think part of that, part of turning the page on that, is to actually ensure the real victims of that lawfare receive some compensation. That's what this fund is going to be targeted at. And again, there's going to be a process to ensure that that money is only given to people who have actually, I hate to say earned it, but the people who actually were really mistreated by the previous administration and Department of Justice.
Go ahead. I understand that everybody is eligible to apply for this fund. I mean, you're eligible, but I assume you're not going to apply and you don't think you should get money out of this fund. Of course. So isn't it just as easy to say that people that attacked police officers should not get taxpayer money from this fund?
Well, look, John, we're not trying to give money to anybody who attacked a police officer. We're trying to give money, not give money, we're trying to compensate people where the book was thrown at them, they were mistreated by the legal system. Sometimes, you know, we do have, John, in this country, innocent until proven guilty. We do have people who were accused of attacking law enforcement officers. That doesn't mean that we're going to completely ignore some of the claims that they're going to make. We're going to evaluate these things on a case-by-case basis. And if we think that somebody, whatever they were accused of, if we think that somebody was unfairly prosecuted and deserves just compensation, then that's what this fund is going to exist to provide. It's just going to correct a wrong, and I think that's a good thing. And I'd encourage everybody, Democrat, Republican, Independent, let's turn the page on this thing that we did under the last administration where we tried to throw people in prison because they had the wrong politics. Let's throw people in prison who broke the law. I think this fund is a good part of getting justice for the people who were wrongly treated. Back there, yeah.
Thank you, sir. Just to follow up on that quickly, does that mean that people that were violent, that were convicted, were mistreated? Are you saying that?
Well, you're asking me to comment on hypotheticals and on any number of dozens of cases. Here's the thing. We're going to look at everything case by case. As you know, every single case has its own details. Every single case has, you know, there are things about it that maybe don't meet the eye. We're just going to look at every case by case. That's all I'm saying. I'm not committing to giving anybody money or committing to giving no one money. What I'm committing to is a legal process to review these claims and to make sure that people who are mistreated by their government get a little bit of compensation because of it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Yes, sir. I realize that the pointer finger is not as precise as I thought it was. The guy in, sorry, I have this cheat sheet, but the problem with being 41 years old is I'm blinder than I was a few years ago. So we'll say blue blazer, blue tie. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I'd like to ask a quick follow-up on Iran, but first I'd like to ask you about fentanyl. Fentanyl, sourced largely from China, killed about 403,000 Americans over the past 7 years, according to CDC data. That's one in every 850 Americans who died. White House counterterrorism director Sebastian Gorka said last week that China's exports amounted to the targeted killing of Americans and war by other means. Do you agree with that assessment? And what is the Trump administration doing to punish and deter China, especially since the Supreme Court struck down the fentanyl tariffs?
So go to ask the second question, because I'll try to take each question and then I'll try to answer them and then we'll go on. And if you ask two questions, I can only guarantee that I'll answer one. In fact, I'm a politician. Maybe I won't even answer the one that you asked. But I will try at least to answer one question.
Okay, well, I'd love to hear the fentanyl response too, if not today sometime.
Go ahead.
On Iran, is Russia taking possession of the enriched uranium in Iran a plausible end to the war? And if not, why not?
So first, on the Russia taking possession of the enriched uranium, look, these things are being discussed through negotiation. That is not currently our plan. That has never been our plan. I've seen some reporting on that. I don't know where it comes from, but the president's going to continue to negotiate a deal. So that is not currently the plan of the United States government. The Iranians have not raised it. My sense is that's not something the Iranians would be particularly excited about, and I know the president isn't particularly excited about it either, but who knows? I'm not going to make pre-commitments in a negotiation on any particular topic. On the question of fentanyl, a lot of people have died from fentanyl, absolutely. A lot of it has come from mainland China. We're certainly aware of that. But here's what I'll say. First of all, we've made incredible strides under Donald Trump's leadership to cut down on fentanyl deaths. If you look at the number of people who died in 2026, it's going to be lower than the number who died in 2025, which is way lower than the number who died in 2024. This is one of the things that I think all Americans, we should be celebrating, and I'm certainly proud of the president's leadership for making this possible. We ran, if you remember, in November of 2024 on a very simple idea that a lot of fentanyl came from East Asia. It was smuggled into Central and South America, and then the cartels would bring it into our country, and a lot of our people would get poisoned and killed because of it. We said if you got control of the southern border, we would see a substantial reduction in the number of people who died from fentanyl overdoses in the United States of America, and that is exactly what's happened. Now, yes, the president has raised this with President Xi any number of times. I know it came up during the meeting that they had in China just last week, but it's come up in any number of phone calls, and our sense is that President Xi has been willing to work with us on this, and obviously we want to continue to ensure that the Chinese work with us as much as possible because we don't want our people to be poisoned. So we'll keep working on that issue with the Chinese. There's been, I think, a big amount of progress that's been made, but of course we can make a lot more progress, and we're certainly going to be committed to doing exactly that. Right. Yeah.
Me?
White jacket, sorry.
Oh, hey, yeah. Natalie with Washington.
Natalie, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice President. Does the government need to create a new mandatory review process for new AI models, given the concerns about Mythos? And secondly, in a few days, Pope Leo is going to release his encyclical on artificial intelligence. What influence, if any, do you see the Pope's guidance on AI having to broader society?
Well, I mean, I think when the Pope issues an encyclical on artificial intelligence, it's going to have some influence. I, of course, don't know how much influence. I don't know exactly what it's going to say. But I think when the leader of the world's largest Christian denomination speaks on an issue like that, it's certainly going to have some influence. And I'm sure it'll contain a lot of insights, some of which I'll probably agree with, some of which I may not. But I think that it's going to be a very, very important document. And I think that, you know, one of the things I always found fascinating about Pope Leo is that he chose the name Leo XIV, which of course is recollecting Leo XIII. Leo XIII was the Pope during a period of incredible industrial transformation in the entire world. Of course, that industrial transformation, according to a lot of people, led to the rise of fascism and communism in Europe. I think it was interesting that Leo XIV chose that name to maybe apply Christian social teaching in a new era with a new technological innovation in the same way that the Industrial Revolution was the technological innovation of its time. So I think it'll be fascinating. I'm looking forward to reading it. My guess is it's going to have a lot of influence. On the question of what our policy is going to be, look, what we're trying to do in the Trump administration is very simple. The president wants us to be pro-innovation. He wants us to win the AI race against all other countries in the world. He recognizes that AI is going to be an important tool, not just for our economy, but for our military. And so he wants to ensure that we are winning that particular race. We also want to make sure that we're protecting people. We're protecting people's data. We're protecting people's privacy. I think with this Mythos release, one of the things that we're very focused on, of course, is whether not necessarily the developers of Mythos, but whether some other bad actor could use Mythos to target various cybersecurity vulnerabilities. So it's something that right now we're working in a collaborative way with the technology companies, and we're just trying to make sure that the American people are as safe as possible. I'm not going to get ahead of the executive order or any other actions that are going to come out, but we're trying to balance those two things. We want to be pro-innovation. We recognize, I mean, artificial intelligence could be great. It could help us find cures to diseases that currently, you know, people are dying from or suffering from. It also does have some downsides, and we're trying to balance that safety against innovation, and we think that we've got the right balance here in the Trump administration, but it's something we're going to have to keep on working on because that's just the nature of these technologies is they certainly change. Let's go. Is that Reagan all the way in the back? Daily Caller? There we go. Okay. I figured out finally how the seating chart works.
I want to ask you about the anti-fraud task force. You previously mentioned that Ilhan Omar seemed to have committed immigration fraud. Do you anticipate an indictment against her, an indictment related to that situation?
Yeah, so Reagan, I don't want to prejudge an investigation. I mean, you read the things about Ilhan Omar and about, you know, who she married and whether she didn't marry this person or that person. It certainly seems like something fishy is there, but everybody's entitled to equal justice under the laws. So we're going to investigate it. We're going to take a look at it. If we think that there's a crime, we're going to prosecute that crime. And that's something the Department of Justice is looking at right now.
Mr. Vice President.
Go ahead.
Based on what you've seen
during your work on this anti-fraud task force, do you believe anything should change about our immigration or refugee policies to stop fraud in the United States?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, one thing I'd say is that the biggest immigration fraud that existed under the Biden administration, it's not just that they let a flood of people across the southern border. That was obviously a very major problem and something I'm proud of the president for stopping. But it's also that they allowed the asylum and refugee claimant process to become totally fraudulent. And so here's what would happen, right? You would take a person who, in normal cases, would just be a traditional economic immigrant. Whether you let them into the country or not, they're trying to come because they want a better job, okay? They would come into the country and say that they were fleeing persecution, and they would say that they were an asylum claimant. And then effectively what the Biden administration would do is say, okay, you're an asylee, go into the interior of the country, here's a work permit, maybe come back in 10 or 12 years for your hearing on whether you actually have a legitimate asylum claim. So what did that mean? That meant that person was just completely given amnesty and released into the interior of the country. Well, what if that person was a criminal? What if that person actually had a violent history? We didn't do any of the work necessary to ensure that the people coming into our country claiming to be asylum claimants actually had anything legitimate or anything good in their background. So that is a serious problem. It is something that we have fixed in the Trump administration, but fundamentally that loophole, you're going to see sometime in the future somebody is going to try to exploit that loophole, and it's one of the things that we're very focused on in the fraud task force is making sure that the people who exploited that loophole are actually prosecuted for it, assuming they committed a crime. Yes. So I don't know your name. You have a beautiful cross necklace, though, so go ahead.
Kara Castronovo from Lentel TV.
Hi,
Thank you so
Kara.
much. I have two questions. One of them is going back to the $1.8 billion fund, not to keep beating that, but sadly Democrat lawmakers are misrepresenting that fund.
I agree.
Yes.
It's a great question.
And sadly some of the mainstream media doesn't understand the magnitude of the political persecution of J6ers. So if a violent offender like a J6er was still over-sentenced and mistreated, literally some of them were sentenced to 24 years in prison, put on an unconstitutional pre-trial detention, literally tortured in cages, wouldn't that person still be able to apply for the fund because of due process? And
this is why we say, just to answer that very briefly, this is why we say we have to evaluate this thing case by case, right? We don't in the United States say that everybody who's accused of a crime is automatically guilty in a court of public opinion. You've got to actually look at this stuff and figure out what were they accused of. Maybe they did something bad even, but what they were accused of was way worse of what they actually did. Maybe they had their entire lives ruined in a totally disproportionate way. That's fundamentally illegitimate and political. And I find, just Carol, on this point, one of the interesting things about the American media is there is a fascination. If you go to any American law school, there are these, prisoner rights clinic. There are people who objectively committed heinous crimes, but the American media and the American Legal Academy has decided that even though they committed bad crimes, their sentence was disproportionate, they were mistreated in some way. You know who never ever gets an ounce of sympathy when it comes to that disproportionate sentencing is people who voted for Donald Trump and participated in the January 6th protest. Go to your second question.
About Pete Davidson, he made a horrific, obscene joke about the murder of your friend Charlie Kirk. What does this still say about where our political divisions have gone, and what are you specifically doing to bridge the divide, especially as a potential future president?
Well, sorry, who was it that said something?
Davidson made a really obscene joke about Charlie Kirk. So what are you doing as a potential future candidate or president to bridge the divide?
Well, first of all, I'm not a potential future candidate. I'm a vice president, and I really like my job, and I'm going to try to do as good of a job as I can. But let me just say this. So you talked about Pete Davidson, who said something bad about Charlie Kirk. Look, Charlie was a very, very dear friend, but more importantly than that, Charlie was a father of two beautiful kids, and he did not deserve to have all of those moments with his kids, all of those moments with his beautiful wife taken from him in the way that happened. I would expect everybody with a heart or a conscience would say whatever we agreed or disagreed with about his particular viewpoints, this is a tragedy, and it's totally unacceptable that it happens in the United States of America. To their credit, a lot of the reporters in this room, even though I don't agree with their politics, they were open about the fact that what happened to Charlie was disgusting and it shouldn't happen in a civilized country. You talk about bridging the divide. I mean, one thing that happened that hits, not quite literally close to home, but there was a very terrible shooting that happened today at a Muslim community center. It seems like 3 people are dead, plus the shooters. And, that that community center is actually very close to this restaurant that Usha and I go to every time we visit. Her family lives in San Diego. She was born and raised in San Diego. Every time we go to San Diego, we go to this restaurant that is like maybe a 5-minute drive from this community center. And I found out about it actually on my way to the White House this morning, and I texted her. I said, would you have known anybody who was like involved in this? And she said, absolutely, I would have known some people, or at least their parents, who might have actually used the services at this community center. I don't know a single person who would say anything other than what I'm about to say, which is that that type of violence in the United States of America is reprehensible, and I encourage every single American to pray for everybody who was involved and affected by it. We don't want that to happen in our country, and may God rest the souls of the people who lost their lives. What I do find a little distressing is that while every person I know, every politically conservative person I know would say exactly what I said about these innocent people who were killed, there were a lot of people who were celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. And I think one way that we can bridge the divide is just have a very simple principle in this country. Number one, we don't want the government throwing people in prison because they have bad politics, however you define bad politics. Number two, and way more importantly, political violence, wherever it comes from, is unacceptable in the United States of America. Let's talk with one another, not shoot each other when we disagree. I think that's the principle that everybody in this room agrees with. It's certainly the principle the President of the United States agrees with. Okay. All right. Sorry. I'm gonna try to read this here. I'm sorry? Okay. Okay, that was kind of interesting, so I'm going to give you the question. All right, go ahead.
So last week, the Pentagon halted deployment of 4,000 troops, U.S. troops, to Poland. This is in direct contradiction to President Trump explicitly promised not to reduce the troop level in Poland. So I'm going to ask you this question, which many people in Poland think. Why are you rewarding Putin and punishing your best ally in Europe?
Well, first of all, I'd say there's been no president who's done more, frankly, to ensure that Ukraine survived the invasion of Russia than Donald Trump. As he famously said, Obama gave him sheets, I gave him javelins, and it was those javelins that ensured that Ukraine still has its territorial sovereignty. What he's also said is that he wants to pursue an American policy that focuses on the interests of the United States. And part of that foreign policy is not to reward Putin or not to punish a country like Poland, which we love. We love Poland. We love the Polish people. No. What we're trying to do, what our foreign policy is geared towards, is promoting European independence and sovereignty. We want Europe to take more ownership over its own territorial integrity. We want Europe to step up in a big way. Now, I think you said 4,000 troops. We've not reduced the troop levels in Poland by 4,000 troops. What we did is that we delayed a troop deployment that was going to go to Poland. That's not a reduction. That's just a standard delay and rotation that sometimes happens in these situations. But here's the fundamental problem. Poland is capable of defending itself with a lot of support from the United States. We're not talking about pulling every single American troop out of Europe. We're talking about shifting some resources around in a way that maximizes American security. I don't think that's bad for Europe. That's encouraging Europe to take more ownership. The United States cannot be the policeman of the world. We want to be good allies. We want to make sure that our troop presence promotes regional stability in Europe. The president has not said, though he could, the president has not said that he's taken all of the troops out of Europe, but Europe has to stand on its own 2 feet. And that's something that he's been consistent of, frankly, not even since the beginning of this administration, going back to the first administration, is we have got to have more sovereignty and more of Europe standing on its own 2 feet. That will continue to be our policy in Europe.
Those troops will go eventually to Poland?
What I said is that is it a delay in troop rotation? Those troops could go elsewhere in Europe. We could decide to send them elsewhere. We actually haven't made the final determination about where those troops are ultimately going to go. But what I'm saying is it is not accurate to say that we are pulling a bunch of troops out. It is a very small and very minor thing. And I think, frankly, a lot of the European media, again, is overreacting to this a bit. And here's one thing I'll say about this. Look, I have, for my entire life, I'm 41 years old. For my entire life, I have heard chirping from the European media about everything that's wrong with the United States of America. We don't have this, we don't have that. We don't spend enough on health care, even though part of the reason why we spend so much on defense was because we have tens of thousands of troops in Europe. I think that if the European media wants to attack the President of the United States, they need to start looking in the mirror. All he has said is that we're going to be good allies, we're going to be good friends, we're going to be trading partners, but it is reasonable for Europe to take a little bit more ownership over its continental integrity. Caitlin.
Vice President, I have a question on the war, but just to follow up, you previously told me that anyone who assaulted a police officer on January 6th should go to prison. So why not rule out giving them taxpayer-funded money?
Well, Caitlin, what I said is we're going to look at everything case by case.
But why not rule it out?
Because, Caitlin, there are people who I don't know their individual circumstances, and I don't rule things out categorically when I know nothing about a person's individual circumstances. Let's say a person is accused, let's say hypothetically, a person is accused of doing something that they never actually did, that they got a kangaroo court, that they had a judge who mistreated them. I think that we should look at those things case by case. We're not making commitments to give anybody money. We're just making commitments to look at things case by case.
But just to follow up on the war, you last week denied that the president said he was not taking Americans' financial situations into consideration when he's making decisions on the Iran war. He was asked about that again. He stood by it, called it a perfect statement, and said he would make it again. Do you believe that Americans' financial situations should be taken into consideration when you're making decisions as an administration about the war?
See, Caitlin, what you did is you misrepresented the question that I was asked, and then you misrepresented the answer that I gave. What I said is that a question that was asked where the president allegedly said that he didn't care about Americans' financial situations. He never said that. What he said is that it was totally taken out of context. What he said is that when he is negotiating with the Iranians, he's focused on the national security objectives that he's trying to achieve. Of course, the president has a mandate to be focused on a number of things. And I guarantee you every single day, I have conversations with him about it. Every single day, he's worried about his fellow Americans. He wants them to be prosperous. He wants them to thrive. He wants them to have good jobs. That's why we've done the things and taken the steps that we've taken in order to create record job growth, in order to create record wage growth, in order to induce trillions of dollars of new investment into our country. That's because he cares about that stuff. What he also said is that when he's talking to the Iranians, he's talking to the Iranians about questions, of course, of national security, like their nuclear program. You could hold two thoughts in your head at the same time, that the president cares about financial security for Americans, but also when he's negotiating with the Iranians, he's talking about the issues that are germane to the concerns of that particular conflict.
Going back to the price tag for this DOJ fund, $1.8 billion. You have people that can't afford groceries. Gas is high. People are making sacrifices in their personal lives to accommodate for this rise in prices. People are telling us that they feel financially worse off. They're very concerned about the uncertainty. How can you justify that amount of taxpayer money for that fund when people are struggling? What do you say to Americans who wonder why this fund is getting all this money and I can't afford basic life amenities?
Well, let me say a couple things about that. First of all, you said $1.8 billion, and it's important for people to realize we're not just writing a $1.8 billion check. We're going to take a lot of people who are going to apply and say that they have been mistreated by their government. We're going to handle those situations case by case, and if we determine they were in fact mistreated by their government, we think it's reasonable to give them just compensation. But when you talk about funds and pots of money that are out there, I mean, thanks to Donald Trump's leadership and the Working Families Tax Cut, we put $40 billion into a rural health care fund in order to stop the closure, or at least prevent some closure, of rural hospitals and rural clinics that had been decimated under the Biden administration. We had a piece of tax legislation that put hundreds of billions of dollars into the pockets of families. No taxes on Social Security, no taxes on overtime, no taxes on tips. So I don't I reject the idea that we can't walk and chew gum at the same time. We can give just compensation to people who are mistreated by the government. We can also make sure that the American people, we do everything that we can to make their lives better, to make them more prosperous, to give them better jobs. That is the primary focus of Donald J. Trump's White House. That's the question all of us ask every single day is, how do we make our fellow citizens more prosperous? We can do that while also taking care of people who were mistreated by the last administration. Go ahead, sir. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Mr. Kurdi's here. After the ceasefire with Iran, drone and missile attacks on the Kurdistan region have not stopped. That happened yesterday as well. What is your position on this issue, and what do you expect from the new Iraqi government regarding the control of militias?
Well, as you know, you've asked the president this question before, and we certainly love the people of Kurdistan. Anytime that drone attacks or missile attacks are hitting anybody, but particularly civilian populations, that's not something we like to see at all. And it's one of the things that sometimes happens. Unfortunately, these ceasefires, they're not always perfect. We've seen that in Gaza. We've seen that certainly in Iran and some of its neighbors. But we have seen a significant reduction in violence over the last few weeks of the ceasefire. And look, fundamentally, the president's been quite clear. This is going to go, again, in one of two directions. We're going to restart the war, which is not the preference of the president of the United States. We're going to restart the operation, or we're going to strike a deal, and I think that's an important thing. That's what we're focused on, and that's what we're going to keep on working towards. Okay. It is very... Okay. In like the purple, kind of the purple dress there, yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vice President. Rowena Ortiz with Turning Point USA. There has been an uptick in religious violence across the country. What's your message to protect people across all faiths in America?
I appreciate that question. Obviously, Turning Points would know a lot about this issue. As we talked about earlier, you guys have been the subject of a fair amount of violence yourself. I guess what I would say is the principle of religious violence is particularly disgusting, especially in the United States of America. And as a devout Christian, I would say it's one of the most anti-Christian things and anti-American things that you could do. And here's why. One, because a fundamental principle of all the great faiths is we are all children of God, and because of that, we are endowed by certain rights that are unique to our status as human beings. You violate those rights, most importantly, when you commit violence against another person. You can violate them in other ways as well, but the most profound way to violate the fundamental right of human dignity is to commit violence. But here's why the religious piece of it is particularly egregious. One of the fundamental American rights that I think came from our Christian heritage as a civilization is the idea that we respect people's religious freedom, in part because we respect them as human beings, but also because we respect their right to find their own pathway to God. You can't force anybody to a pathway to God. They have to, through their own free will, find God themselves. That's one of the reasons why that right of religious freedom is the very first right enshrined in our Constitution. So when you commit acts of violence, you're committing an act against this fundamental idea that people are created in the image of God and that they have the right through their own free will to find God however they might want. And as a Christian, of course, you might have your preference for how they find their pathway to God. They have to find that choice. And anybody who would commit violence against another human being in the name of religion is, I think, doing something that is a violation, of course, of the laws of man, but I think more importantly, it is a fundamental violation of the laws of God. Let me go with. Okay, Garrett, you have your hand up. Garrett,
that's right. That's right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Midterms are well underway. You've got voters going to the polls in 6 states today. You and the president ran on a platform that included no new wars, cutting gas prices, cutting inflation. What do you say to the people who are going to the polls today and who feel like those promises are unkept?
Well, I'd say a few things. First of all, we've delivered great wins for the American people. We ran on delivering tax cuts to the American people, which we did, the largest tax cuts in American history. We ran on cutting taxes, particularly on people who were working on overtime, working on tips. We cut taxes for those Americans. We ran on the promise of bringing investment back into the United States of America, that rather than factory closures, we were going to have factories opening. And we've seen both construction jobs in manufacturing, but also manufacturing jobs have great rebounds under the Trump administration and under our leadership. We are very aware that because of what's going on in the Middle East, gas prices have gone up and a lot of Americans are struggling because of that. Our view is that it is a temporary increase. We're taking a number of steps to try to push back against it and try to ensure that Americans are paying as little at the pump as possible. But I feel quite confident after we've taken care of business in the Middle East, those prices are going to come down. And there have been a lot of prices, as you know, a lot of prices from rent to housing, where we still got a lot of work to do, but we do see some real progress made across the economy on pricing, but also on people's jobs. Okay. I have John. I'm going to call on John. I'm just going to start calling John Rosh.
John Rosh with the Daily Mail.
Yes.
Great to see you. Thank you.
Great to see you too. Thank you.
So Trump initially said that the war would last 6 weeks. We are now, it's been going on for 11 weeks and 3 days. What's your message to the American people as to why it's gone on so long and it hasn't ended yet?
Well, first of all, the president said it's going to be a short-term operation, and I think that has proven out to be true. The active period of conflict lasted about 5.5 weeks, and now we've been in the ceasefire where we're trying to get a negotiated settlement that gets the American people the things that we need for our national security. So I've said before that we're going to go one of two options here. We're going to have a good settlement that actually gets the American people what they need, or we're going to go back to a kinetic operation. Obviously, the president prefers to get that settlement. I think the Iranians prefer to get that settlement. But regardless of what direction the president ultimately goes down, whatever he ultimately decides, I think it's important for the American people to know two things. Number one, it will be for their security and their prosperity. That's why we're doing this. And number two, this is not going to be the sort of thing that lasts forever. I think a lot of Americans, especially in my generation, who are worried about forever, endless conflicts, we have to remember, I think you said 11 weeks, a big chunk of that has been a ceasefire. This is not a forever war. We're going to take care of business and come home. That's what the president's promised, and that's exactly what he's going to deliver. Go ahead. Yes. No, the orange. Yeah. Guys, please don't shout over each other.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Egyptian Foreign Minister today, in an interview on CNN, he said that the Arab countries are working with you on a memorandum of understanding between the U.S. and Iran that can lead to a deal. Can you confirm that? And one other question also on Iran. You've spent over than 20 hours with the Iranian negotiating. Do you believe that other countries may be able to achieve what those negotiations could not?
Well, I think that the purpose of our initial negotiation was, one, to establish some relationships between two countries that hadn't talked directly in a very, very long time. And number two, just to get the pathway started to negotiation. I don't think any of us, meaning me, Jared Kushner, and Steve Witkoff, had any great confidence that we were going to be able to reach a deal. But we did think we were going to take important steps along the pathway to reaching a deal, and we did. Now, you asked what the Egyptian foreign minister said. I haven't seen those comments, so I won't comment on them myself. What I'd say is I'm not going to detail what's going on in the negotiation. There's a lot of back and forth. A lot of good progress is being made. But we're just going to keep on working at it, and eventually we'll either hit a deal or we won't, but we're going to keep on working at it. And I think it's important for us to actually privately have these conversations, because sometimes when you're doing a negotiation and you put everything out there in public, it actually complicates things more than it should. So we're going to keep these negotiations private until we've got something, of course, to tell the American people, and at that time we will. Okay. Is that a magenta tie? It's hard to tell. He's like a purple tie there, right?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, Mr.
So this guy insists that he has the real purple tie. So I'll give you a question too. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Two questions for you, one on Iran and one on China, given the President's trip last week to Beijing. On Iran, you met on April the 11th with Iranian negotiators, including the foreign minister. Is it your sense, Mr. Vice President, that they're just stringing the U.S. along? That's the sense from lawmakers from both parties. And then on China, You come from a state that manufactures a lot of automobiles. Is it your sense that within this term that you have with the president, that China-branded vehicles will be sold right here in America?
Well, I think that what the president has shown a willingness to do, unlike any president in my lifetime, is to protect the American automotive industry. We are not going to let the American automotive industry disappear. There are a lot of ways in which we've reinvested, in which we've tariffed foreign competitors to ensure that American car workers, American auto workers, and the products they develop are going to be made right here in the United States of America and also available right here in the United States of America. I think it's important for just the American people. I want to make this point. Car manufacturing is one of those skills that when it disappears, it's hard to regain. And when you've got people who can build complex machines, and our great workers in Ohio, Michigan, and elsewhere, they do a very good job. They also, God forbid, in times of national emergency, can be called on to manufacture other complex machinery. So it's very, very important that we protect that native auto industry. The president has done more on this than anybody, but we're certainly going to keep on working at it. You asked about being strung along. Look, you never know until you know, right? What all we can do is negotiate in good faith, try to find a pathway that accomplishes the president's objectives, that accomplishes the national security interests of the American people, and gets this thing in a good place. I think somebody earlier asked this question. I am not certain, and I'm not going to be certain until we sign a deal that we have a deal, but I feel confident enough to keep on doing the work and to try to find a good deal for the American people, and that's what I'm going to do. So the guy with the real purple tie, I will give you the final question, and then I'm going to have to hit the road.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Sorry, this guy and then the very tall guy here. We'll give him the question. Sorry, I can't get to everybody. Marco's right. This really is chaos. This is crazy.
Yeah.
You guys got to behave yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The president's financial disclosures were released recently, and they showed a lot of stock trades in companies that he has talked up at events, official events at the White House, on his Truth Social account, sometimes even putting the stock ticker symbols in his posts and encouraging people to buy their stock. Americans, according to recent polling, are increasingly describing the president as corrupt. And trading stocks...
This is a hell of a question.
Thank you, sir. Trading individual stocks is something that you said that public officials should not be able to do when you ran for Senate all those years ago. And yet the president, who arguably has access to more non-public information than your average senator, is not only buying and selling individual stocks either through his trust.
Okay. What's the question?
Yeah. The question, sir, is how can you and your administration argue to Americans that you're cleaning up corruption, you're preventing fraud, you're fighting the sorts of things that harm people and people's financial situations, when the president seems to be talking up stocks that he owns, selling them, and enriching himself?
Okay, so here, let me answer your question here. That was a doozy. Before I answer your question, I want to just observe there are different ways to ask a question. Okay, you could just ask a question, try to get your answer, or you could do like a speech where you say, Mr. Vice President, you're a terrible human being, and so is the president, and so is the entire cabinet, and then I'm like, what's your question? And then your question is, how dare you? Come on, man. Have a little bit of objectivity in the way that you ask these questions, because there were a lot of things in that speech masquerading as a question that didn't actually get asked, okay? Number one, the president doesn't sit at the Oval Office on his computer on his Robinhood account buying and selling stocks. That's absurd. He has independent wealth advisors who manage his money. He is a wealthy person. He has had success in business. He's not making these stock trades himself. And your question imputes that. It doesn't say it exactly, but a reasonable person listening to that question would assume the president is sitting around and doing that. He's not. Second of all, you're right. I am a big fan of banning members of Congress from trading stocks. So is the President of the United States. all of us believe that nobody should be taking proprietary information gained from public service and buying and selling stocks. We want to ban that process, and I think the way to lead by example is banning that process, banning that approach, and making it illegal, which is exactly what the president has proposed doing. Okay. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Jordan Conrad, with Gateway Pundit. I'll try to make this short. There was, you might have seen this, there was a massive United Kingdom rally in London just last weekend. They were protesting mass illegal immigration and the replacement of British culture. What message do you think this should send to globalist European leaders and to leaders here? And also, I wanted to ask about several House members are revamping this push to pass it's called the Dignity Act, but it's really just an amnesty bill giving work visas and allowing millions of illegals in the country. Is that something the White House wants to see stopped in the House?
Well, number one, I don't like giving amnesty to anybody. Number two, since you asked about Great Britain and the United Kingdom rally, one of the great ironies of this job is that for the past couple of years, you see these protests break out all over the country, and sometimes they're fairly well attended, and sometimes they're very poorly attended. Everybody holds these signs saying "No Kings," right? And how many Democratic lawmakers have I seen holding up signs that say "No Kings"? They are very, very insistent that we not have kings. And then King Charles comes to the congressional chamber, and these guys break out in rapturous applause. So maybe they don't care so much about kings as they pretend that they do. Maybe they just don't like the agenda that we're implementing that's actually making American workers and American families safe and prosperous again. But to answer your question about this immigration issue, look, one of the problems that we have in all of Western societies is that we have a lot of people who've decided, Wall Street bankers, corporate lobbyists, and government officials, that what the United States and what the West need is more and more cheap labor. What we believe in this White House is what we need more and more of is high wages for American workers and investing in our own people. What you see all over the West, and it's kind of crazy, is this idea that the way to generate prosperity is to bring in millions and millions of unvetted people and drop them into your neighborhoods, and we simply reject that idea. So to everybody in the UK who rejects that idea, I'd encourage them to just keep on going. It's okay to want to defend your culture. It's okay to want to live in a safe neighborhood. It's okay to want your job to go to yourself and your neighbors and not to a stranger who you don't even know. It is reasonable for the people in Western societies to want to control who comes into their country and who doesn't. A lot of people, frankly, a lot of people in the media have tried to persuade all of those people that it's somehow racist to want to protect your borders, even though very often the very people who are most affected by low-wage immigration are lower-income Black and Hispanic Americans right here in the United States of America, and I guarantee that's true in the UK. So we believe in making America great again. You can't do that unless you protect your borders. I'd encourage our friends in the UK to follow the same path. Thank you all. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
RSBN. This broadcast is brought to you by MyPillow. You can get pillows, much more at mypillow.com/RSBN. As always, you can support Mike Lindell and RSBN by using code RSBN at mypillow.com/RSBN. And speaking of Right Side Broadcasting Network, if you would like to donate to the network, you can go to rsbnetwork.com/donate. Again, that is rsbnetwork.com/donate. Thank you for joining us here at Right Side. I'm Matt Kane, and we'll see you soon.